thank you for joining us for today's episode, I guess, of Ask Stacy and Amanda on Facebook Live with Bank of North Dakota. We are live every single Tuesday, usually at 2:30. Sometimes it's special other days or times, but that's why it's important to make sure that you turn on those live notifications so that you know every single time that we go live, so you can stay up to date with all of the great stuff that's happening here at Bank of North Dakota. So today we are talking with Cindy Sanford. She is the leader of educational outreach and college planning here at BND, and she has a wealth of knowledge about non-traditional students and them going to college and getting training beyond high school. So that is what we're talking about today. So Cindy, thank you so much for lending your expertise on this subject.
Well, thanks for having me.
Yeah, very welcome. So Cindy, what is considered a non-traditional college student?
A non-traditional student is called someone who's married, someone in the military, or usually over 24. So that would be the traditional, what they call non-traditional students.
Okay.
There are some exceptions to that, but so if you're, if you have a child at 18, you would still be considered a non-traditional, but that's very unusual. Most of them are older, what I would call, we used to call them older than average students, but now
It's more that non-trad.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, pretty much anything other than a 18-year-old who just graduated from high school and is going to college for the first time. Of course, students, like you said, could be non-traditional in that category too, but typically if we're doing generalizations, those are kind of the two differences. So college students, non-traditional college students typically have a couple different concerns when they're starting on the path to go to college. What are some of those common concerns?
Well, a couple of them are, they haven't been to school for years or they've never gone. So how am I going to study? What are some of the things I'm going to do there? Being on campus just intimidates me. It's like probably like starting a brand new job, your very first job. Like, what am I going to do? All the unanswered questions, how am I going to be? And, am I going to be the grandma on campus? Am I going to be the old lady and everybody's going, what is she doing here? Does she work here? Or instead of sitting in class. So being in class around usually younger students might sometimes intimidate some of the students. The cost of the education, that's always a question. And then how am I going to balance everything? So how many balls can I put in the air? So I've got work, I've got family, I've got other social events that I committed to and volunteerism, that type of thing. So how am I going to fit all that into up in the air without dropping anything? So those are probably the biggest concerns.
Okay. And I remember being in college and I went to a small private school, so we didn't have a lot of non-traditional students, but the ones that were in my classes, they brought such a value to our classes because they had like a real life perspective because they've actually lived life. So they could just offer a lot of perspective that all of us traditional college students maybe weren't thinking about or missing out on. So I know I always really enjoyed it when we had older students in the class, for sure.
Well, I think it works both ways because you've got that non-traditional student who learns truly just as much from the younger students around, or I'm going to call the new students, first-time students, as they do from some of the peers around. They become their peers. So I think it's a win-win all the way around. Everybody learns something from each other. So
absolutely. So where should a student, an adult student, start if they're thinking about going back to college, either for the first time or maybe they're going back after they've stopped out for a little bit? What are some of the first steps that they should take?
Well, if they're going back, and that's usually my experience, most of them had gone to school a semester or had gone, a year, 2 years, and then life just happens, which it can happen to anyone.
Absolutely.
So those students need to start with getting their transcript or transcripts because they might be 1 or 2 classes, they might have gone different places. So you want to take those and get those all sent in. The second thing is, and for some reason non-traditional students kind of fight this, but you should do the FAFSA. It has changed tremendously. If you have, they might have students from their own home, or their kids may be going to school. So fill out the FAFSA to see if they're going to be able to be awarded any financial help that way. So that's probably the second biggest area. If they've never gone, then they need to work with, fill out the FAFSA, and definitely make it a point to go to college and talk to somebody and look at, what area you want to go into, what are some of those, and the people, financial aid, and that's probably a bigger issue with non-traditional. They seem to be more worried about how am I going to pay for it. Work with your financial aid office, because sometimes they have some things that they can show you that it's just going to make it a lot easier to start that process.
For sure. So what about a student who hasn't quite decided maybe what modality or how they want to take their classes? Because there's a lot of options. There's seated, where you're in the classroom with all the students and the teachers up in front. You have online, and then you have a mix of the two. What would you recommend for students, or what kinds of advice do you have for students when they're not quite sure how they want to pursue their degree?
Well, it varies on the student, from student to student, because if they've never taken an online class, and they want to, the best one would be one of those where you're in class and it's part online, because then you can learn how to use the system. A lot of non-traditional students will go with online, or they have 8-week classes. They like that, so you can actually get 2 classes in one semester, but you're only taking one at a time. But with the online, a lot of, more and more classes are going online, and it makes it easier for them to study, but be sure that they know how to run the system. We saw a lot of people drop out because they didn't understand how the online system worked. So that kind of half of each, then they have support with the class, and that's where budding up with a younger student sometimes really helps the non-traditional student.
Yeah, or maybe a non-traditional student has already taken a few classes, right? Yeah, then you'll have something in common and you'll have a study buddy.
Yep.
So as far as transferring credits, you send your transcripts in. Should this, who usually makes the call if those classes transfer in, what they transfer in as? Is that strictly the registrar? Do they work with like an academic advisor to kind of see their career plan, or?
It goes to the registrar. The registrar makes the call, and then you have what's called a 201 file, and that's going to be your graduation, how you go through that process. So once the registrar says, okay, you can use these classes for this or this, then you're going to go to your advisor. You're going to work with your advisor and say, okay, what classes do I need to finish, whatever, what point you're at. So if you're going to finish a 2-year first, which I highly recommend, if you're going that route, finish your 2-year, because if life happens again, you have your 2-year and then go ahead and go on. So I would highly recommend that to anybody.
Perfect. And I see that we're hovering around 3 to 4 viewers. So just a reminder, if you ever have any questions, pop us a comment below and we'll and we'll answer it during the video or after the fact, if we don't catch you during this time. But okay, so we talked a little bit about paying for college, because obviously cost is a concern no matter where you are in the college process. So we already talked about the FAFSA, the free application for federal student aid, and why it's important to submit that. And you kind of alluded to, don't be nervous about filing the FAFSA, because I mean it's not as scary as I think we all think. And I know back in the day it was a lot more of I say back in the day like it was out.
She's so old.
I am so old. But it's a lot simpler of a process now. It's not as tedious. I mean, you can do it paper, but you don't have to, tax transcripts, FAFSA, you just transfer back and forth. It's a lot easier these days.
Yep, the process is a lot easier, and I think people are surprised how much money they would get as, and I know you've gone to unsubsidized, subsidized loans, how much they could qualify for. So that is easy. And you also have the work option. I mean, a lot of employers will pay for X amount of education, 1 class, 2 class, sometimes up to 6 classes. Majority, you have to get a C or better, and that way you can get it.
So check with your employer to see if you have employer's assistance. It looks like,
Chris. Hey Chris.
Cindy Sanford is a fantastic lady. Thanks, Chris. All right. I like it when we get comments. Leave more, everyone. I love it. All right, so yeah, we talked about that employer assistance, and not every employer has this, but I think it's something that is becoming more and more common with a lot of employers. Just because, you know, they want to help their employees either get an advanced degree, another credential, or even just take, you know, a class here or there to expand their knowledge base to help them be better at their job. So that's a really great thing. And then also, I mean, a lot of non-traditional students are also current or former military members. So they have a lot of benefits too.
So it can be the person that was in the military, or it can be some of the other people that, you know, the family members. So those are also part of that group that can find resources.
And I know I was doing a little bit of Googling, and there's just so many military tuition benefits for education. I mean, if you know you're a military person, talk to whoever at the college to see what benefits that you qualify for. Almost all colleges have a military office to help students navigate that process. So yeah, that's another thing. I know I say it in almost every video that I do, but find somebody to connect with on campus, because even if they're not the right person to talk to, they'll probably know the right person for you to talk to, and then you can get them moving in the right direction. So, all right, Cindy, what last piece of advice do you have for a non-traditional adult student?
Get your transfers out if you have them. If not, and also fill out your FAFSA and just go ahead and do it. Find someone on campus. Like Amanda said, there's so much help on campus, and you just need to connect up and, you know, go to the lunch and sit next to someone that's been there for a year maybe and have them show you the ropes. But go ahead and jump in with both feet. So it'll be worth it.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Cindy. I really appreciate it. Again, if you have any comments, questions on anything that we talked about today, or suggestions for future videos, go ahead and leave us a comment below or send us a direct message. But we will be live next week, so make sure you have on those live notifications, and we will see you then. Bye, everyone.
Bye.